Age of 19 years, got shot in the face by a shotgun. I was completely blind for about 6 months.
Welcome to the free sermon podcast of the Potter's House Church in Virginia Beach, affiliated with Christian Fellowship Ministries. Our vision is winning souls, making disciples, and planting churches. It's Tuesday, where you're going to hear a powerful testimony of God's grace revealed in human lives. Each Tuesday, you'll hear Pastor Adam interviewing pastors from around the world to share the mighty miracles that God has done in their lives to give you hope for yours. We share the stories of the men behind the messages you hear every other day on this podcast. Keep in mind that the free version only includes a portion of the whole testimony interview. To listen to the full version, use the links in the show notes to subscribe via Apple Podcasts or supercast.tech. Every dollar goes to supporting world evangelism. Enjoy today's Testimony Tuesday.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the VBPH Sermon Podcast. You have found us here on Testimony Tuesday once again, and we are excited because we have somebody new to our show, and that is Evangelist Leonard Williams, all the way from Redlands, California. It's been a little bit of a battle to get him on, so we appreciate him making the time. Pastor Williams, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome. You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Yes. Well, your reputation has preceded you. I've heard lots of interesting things about you from some good friends, and you were recommended to the podcast by Pastor Deontay Scott up there in Spring Lake, North Carolina. So we want to say thank you to him for inviting you on.
More than likely, yeah. He's a good friend of mine.
Awesome. Well, why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself to those who don't know you, and you and your wife, and where you're serving the Lord, and what God's been doing in your life lately.
My name is Leonard Williams. My wife is Patricia. We are serving God here in the Redlands, California church under Pastor Richard Cox. We've been here under him probably the last 18 years as an evangelist this time around. And we got, originally out of Yuma, Arizona. That's where I got saved in 1983. And God has helped us over the years in ministry and where we had been in the two churches we have pioneered and taken over. And my ministry journey as an evangelist probably for the last 21 years overall. But it's been a wonderful time in God, and God just really helping us coming from livestock that is unbelievable, that's not worth or much looked upon, coming from a horrible life, actually. So, but God's over the last 40 years of being saved, giving our life to Christ. It's been a real journey throughout our lifetime as a Christian, just watching the hand of God move in places we have been, things, the challenge He's put to us and about us and where we were going and the destiny where we're at today. Little did I know where we were going to end up as Christians when we first got saved in 83. I had no intentions really of ever surrendering to God. But God is, through His circumstances, did not leave me alone and left me pretty much defenseless at some time in my life. But watched my marriage destroyed, drugs and immorality, all types of things. But I'm not pleased of even as a sinner. Many things I probably would never tell anyone about. But over the last, like I said, 40 years, it's been a wonderful journey, man, in the kingdom of God. Just to watch God supernaturally get involved in our lives. A marriage that was destroyed because of sin and gang violence and drugs. just a number of different things, and ready for divorce at the age of 25. Met my wife. Actually, I met my wife when I was 16 years old in high school, and we just, you know, developed into a relationship over the years. Going to school for several years together, and then moved in together with her. I was 17; she was 19 years old, and that was the beginning journey, I guess, of our relationship, and that would lead into our marriage. And never knowing, coming from, even though we're both Hispanics, but coming from totally different backgrounds. She came from a very close, tight-knit Christian Catholic family. On the other hand, I come from a very wild, violent type of family. You if I could, that time to be able to share, it's almost.
Well, that's kind of the advantage of a podcast, is we do have some time to go into those things. We do enjoy having that, because oftentimes you get to share little snippets of your testimony in sermons, but usually they're limited to 5 or 10 minutes of a total message that you're giving. So why don't you take us back to where you grew up? Did you say you were from Yuma, Arizona?
I originally grew up, and I was born in a little town in the Imperial Valley, California, called Brawley, California. So I was born there. For probably the first 6 years, we traveled throughout California. My dad worked for the Southern Pacific Railroad at the time. I think I moved to Yuma. Probably I was about 6 or 7 years old when we originally moved into Yuma. And
Okay.
there's where my dad took up root with us and just, bought a home there, and that's where we stayed.
And so what was family life like in your house?
Overall, it was a decent family. I'm not going to say we were great. I'm going to say, my dad he worked hard. He worked hard. He also was a man that loved to drink. He was a drinker. We had our ups and downs, man, with abuse and, being beat with anything you could possibly be beat with. I'm talking about anything from a switch to a extension cord to a water hose, and I can't just say that was, growing up on the streets and just being a man with no restraints, even though my parents, they tried to restrain us and try to lead us on the path to do good. Because I can remember being a kid, my dad would always have us going to church, like for a catechism class after just regular school. He would bring inspiring priests to the house, and they would speak to us about the Bible. So I knew about God. I grew up knowing about God, but there was no true leadership or exampleship about who God was or how to serve God or what to deal outside of, there's a God in heaven, and you need to go to church. But I don't remember ever hearing or seeing my family, my parents going to church, unless it was a wedding, a funeral, or a baptism. But outside of that, there was no real direction about church attendance and how important it was.
Okay. So, but it does sound like there was some Catholic background, maybe tradition of the family kind of thing. Do you know where that started? Is that kind of a family tradition, you think?
Yes, that is most definitely a family tradition. most of my family were all Catholics by, and I'm going to use the phrase by name only. You know, they talked about being a Catholic. Again, there was no real church attendance. And to lead us to that, so we did end up having to go to catechism and Sunday school. But, you know, when I became an age to be able to, you dropped me off on Sunday school, well, the moment you turn the corner, I'm going the other direction. You know, so that's just the way it was.
And how many kids, brothers and sisters, do you have?
There was 12 of us all together, and I'm the fifth to the oldest. I'm the third to the oldest boy. There was 8 boys and 4 girls, including myself. So you know, we were a very large family.
Yes, that is a large family. Was there a fight to find food in the house?
No, not the fight to find food. You know, there was always something to eat. We may not want to eat what was there, but there was always something to eat. It's just a matter of eating what was there, and if that was appealing to you, then you would eat it. If not, you know, well, then you're left out. My mother always cooked. There was always a hot meal. There was always, you know, fresh tortillas in the house. You know, so that was not the problem.
Wow. So yeah, that's a foreign concept to a lot of families today, is the difference between, you know, growing up in a house where there's 2 or 3 or maybe 4 kids, but 12 brothers and sisters. That is quite a lot.
Yes.
Do you have any lessons or lifelong, you know, things that you've taken away from having such a big family environment like that?
You know, the way I look at it, hey, if you like a big family, that's fine with you. Not me. I got 2 kids. I got 1 boy and 1 girl. That was it for me. That was it. And everybody saying, man, I bet you want a large family coming for me. No, I really don't. I don't want a large family. I've had my share with large families. My wife comes from a family of 6, you know, but Matt, we have 2.
So you said that when they dropped you off at the church, you ran the other direction. So did you find yourself getting in trouble in your teen years?
Uh, Not at first. When I went the other direction, you know, actually I was going down the street to a community pool, and in the back of the pool there was some shuffleboards. There's and a bunch of elderly gentlemen back there playing shuffleboard. So I would go watch them play shuffleboard back there, and that's where I would spend probably an hour watching them play shuffleboard until it was time for me to them to pick us up at catechism, man, and then I'd go back to wait for my parents to pick me up. But I
So
go ahead.
So, and what about in school? Did you, do you remember anything anything remarkable from going to school
Well,
there in Yuma, Arizona?
well, I was I played a lot of sports in school. You know, lots of sports. I played basketball, baseball, softball, football, anything I could, because I really didn't want to turn, if I may say, out a lot like my father. You know, because like I said, he was gone working. He always worked. There's no doubt about it. He was a working. But his drinking when he would come home late on Friday night, mid Saturday afternoon, because he was only home just for the weekends, and then had to return back for work. And I just didn't, I could say, well, I didn't want to be like that, but in reality, that's exactly what I was. Even though being in sports, got involved in quite a bit of trouble as a teenager. you know, but I tried to stay out of it. But then you couldn't do it.
Was that because you got caught up in the wrong crowd as you got older?
Well, probably part of it. But the other part was I had two older brothers in me, so we pretty much ran together. And so my older brother started running. And, back then it was, nowadays everybody's a gang. This is a gang, there's a gang. We didn't consider ourselves a gang. It was just people we went to school with, you know, uh, but we didn't consider ourselves a gang. And so you figure in the late 60s, probably really the gang life began to flourish there in Arizona. And I can remember, I remember exactly the year, but Newsweek had an article with pictures of certain individuals and how they dressed. And they entitled them, "This is the attire of a gang." Well, just so happened that was part of the neighborhood and the friends that I ran with and hung out with. So we were probably one of the very first individuals out of Yuma at the time to be considered a gang by the public, if I may say that.
Wow. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about kind of the environment that you were in. What was Yuma, Arizona like in the late 60s, early 70s?
Yuma was really it's a agriculture place. Lots of agriculture. That was the main, if you want to say, the main source of income for many. The agriculture there. There's also we have the Marine Corps Air Base that is there, which probably is the largest airstrip in the world at the time for the military. Then we have another Yuma Proving Grounds. That's the Yuma Proving Grounds, the Army base. And out there, they employed quite a few workers, both military, Marine Corps, and the Army employed quite a few civilians. And, they were both test sites. YPG, that was a test site for tanks and all these vehicles. They were used in the desert for the military. And they would explode bombs out there, bomb shelters out there that they would do target with bombs and different around different machine guns and 50 cals and all these things and all these tanks. And so that was pretty good. But it's just a community of migrant workers, a lot of the individuals there, especially I can remember being a youth, a teenager, working in the fields. I had picked anywhere from cantaloupes to oranges, broccoli, cauliflower, watermelons, cantaloupes, you name it. Uh, for the summer work, that's what we would do. I worked for the military, the Yuma Proving Grounds, for several years on for the summertime for a Yuma a program just for school kids. So they would hire us for a summer here, summer there, depending on our our ability to work. So but yeah, that's Yuma.
And do you remember having, as you were getting into your teens and thinking about adulthood, do you remember having any dreams or aspirations for your future life?
No, I didn't. Be honest, man. That was those furthest things. It's like life. And back then, coming from the Hispanic background, we didn't comprehend, or we weren't always looking towards the future. where will we end up 20 years down the road? Where will we be 30 years? Any real aspirations to better yourself? And I didn't. None of my brothers did. None of my family did. And lots of my friends were the same way. They, we all end up getting caught up in some type of drug or some type of mischief, uh, criminal activity or whatever. And many of them gone to prison. Some of them are dead today. In reality, and truthfully, I have no idea where a lot of my old friends are at this very moment.
Mm. So, I mean, other than the maybe the lack of a dream or a goal for your life, you sound pretty much like a typical kid, growing up at the time. But you said that some of the attire or the style that you were wearing was maybe thought of in the wrong way. So, what did that lead to next?
I just, just the lifestyle continued to, would go to school, still be a part of school, still going to school, getting an education. But on the weekends, it would lead us to a party life, drinking, smoking weed, doing whatever we got in a whole lot of fights and stuff with other neighborhoods. And it's just, that was the way it was.
So did you find yourself getting violent quite a bit, or like what did that mean?
Well, getting violent, no. I mean, it's just typical because you're from this part of the neighborhood, they're from that neighborhood. It's just a rival neighborhood. So I couldn't say violent. It wasn't like all we could think about is being angry and hateful at people, man. It was just, hey, this is what we did for recreation, and we weren't playing sports.
It's just kind of defending your
Yeah,
territory
pretty
kind of
much.
thing.
Defending something that didn't belong to you anyways, which is stupid now, but hey, it is what it is.
Well, I mean, when you're in that environment, it's probably like one of the most important things that you can do.
Oh, definitely.
So did you end up graduating from high school?
No, I quit at the beginning of my junior year, missing a credit. For the fact is, I did not want to stand up before the class and read or do an essay or a speech or something. I said later for this, I was telling people, not even to this day, I said, I wasn't the brightest crayon in the box. I couldn't read well. I wasn't smart. That's just the way it was. And it's not because I'm, I was an ignorant young man. It's because I did not apply myself. And I did just enough to get the grade to pass. And that was it.
So missing that one credit, they didn't let you pass, huh?
Well, no, it's just because at that time, I just quit. I quit going. I said, I'm done. I'm not going to stand up here and read and get laughed at and stuff, man. So I quit going.
So was there some fear of embarrassment?
Yeah.
Underneath that?
Oh, definitely. There was a whole lot of fear of embarrassment. People loved to laugh at people. You couldn't read well. You weren't, you couldn't speak well enough. It's like, look at the dummy, and that's not even the case.
Well, how ironic is it that you being fearful of speaking in front of a crowd, and now your profession for 30 years has been preaching to churches?
Well, that's the sense of humor that God has. And I said, I'm not going to do this. I quit. But to sum up some of this back, at the age of 19 years old, I got shot in the face by a shotgun blast because of gang violence. I was completely blind for about 6 months. Today,
Well, you got to explain what led up to that. How did this happen?
It was just having to do with with the lifestyle of the streets. A couple of things. I had a '62 Impala. They stole it. They burned it. Uh, and I knew at that, somewhere said I'm going out for revenge. I knew who pretty much did it. Found out, and so that was the whole motivation behind it to get me to go pursue these individuals. And that's where it was. But a lot of it had to do because of different the neighborhoods again. So,
So a rival gang stole your car and you went out to go after
right,
them.
exactly.
And so somebody pulls out a shotgun and shoots you.
Well, the thing was, it's July 15th, 1977. It's a late Saturday night. We run across these people from that neighborhood, and we're heading down one of the main streets in Yuma at the time, which was called 4th Avenue, still is to this day. And it's about midnight, somewhere around there, and gunshots are ringing out through the city. Very little traffic, man. You can just hear the shotguns blast going off. It's like it was an old cops and robber, Bonnie and Clyde type of setting, man. We're chasing these people and we're just blasting at them. And so, they were able to escape us, blocked us off. And so when they blocked us off, the car making a right-hand turn just let out the side window with the shotgun blast. And unfortunately or fortunately, I'm the one that got hit.
Wow. Well, that's no small things. So you said you were 19 when this happened,
Yeah, I was
right?
19 years old.
Well, that is a pretty life-shaking experience. So what was the immediate impact? I mean, you survived, but what was the impact to your physical health from this?
Like I said, I was completely blind for several months. The doctors didn't have no idea the extent. I didn't know the extent of the injury. The police reports were saying my head should have been taken off at my shoulders. They're telling me, young man, you should be dead. And even being a sinner, I knew that there was a God, but I didn't know him. I said, luck has nothing to do with this God in heaven. And to this day, after several surgeries on my eyes, they couldn't restore it. And I can remember my wife, or the time of my girlfriend being pregnant. I remember saying, God, all I want to do is be able to see if my child is a boy or a girl. And lo and behold, that's what God gave me, But to this day, I'm legally blind. My left eye there's no vision in my left eye. If you were to meet me in person, you couldn't tell I was legally blind because I get around very well. Uh, you know, I said I'm legally blind today. I wear, contact lens just to be able to read certain things. And, when I read when I read my Bible or write a sermon, I got to use this magnifying glass just to be able to read some things. And, that happened at 19. Most people would think, man, did you get saved? Did you run to God? No, I didn't. I didn't get saved till 6 years later at 25.
Well, it wasn't for the fact that God wasn't reaching out to you. It sounded like you had, at least maybe from a Catholic upbringing, a sense of God's protection, even in that situation, but still was not enough to bring you to Him. Does that sound
No,
right?
definitely. No, most definitely. That was not enough. Like I said, I knew about God for what I was taught, um, but I never didn't, you know, and if I may, and I can say it was the grace of God because I could remember as a young child, maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, there used to be a bus going through the neighborhood and picking up kids that wanted to go to church. And I don't remember if it was an Assemblies of God church or a Baptist church, but I can remember my mom saying, "You guys need to go on that bus and go to church." And I went several times, but one time in particular, they pulled an altar call and they called people to the front to receive Christ. And I went down and I gave my life to Christ at that time. But, being a kid, you have no real concept of that. And, years later, after uh, my life, my gang life, man, my home life, and on, probably in 2003 through 2002, uh, I'm heading back to Yuma for Yuma Harvesters Homecoming. And my wife and myself were at a light. She's driving. And at this light on 4th Avenue and 3rd Street, I looked across and this church is still there. And God spoke to me and he said, "This is where you first met me."
This was the place that had picked you up in the bus.
Yes. Hmm.
Wow. What kind of impact did that have on you when you realized that?
I mean, to this day, it still has tremendous impact on knowing that, and like I said, because that church, I could pass that church, and I did for many, many years while I was a teenager growing up in Yuma, even to young adult, even to my 20s. Um, I've seen that church, and there was really no profound effect on me. It was just a staple there. But on this time, I mean, the impact was so profound. I felt like God transferred me from my vehicle into that little church again. I could see the platform. I could see the altar. I could see the church slanted going down to the altar. And it was there then when God really spoke and said, "This is your encounter here." It's like when God tells Jacob in Genesis 35, "Return to Bethel and dwell there," the place he first met God. That's how profound it was to me. And today it's still that profound.
Wow, so that's really interesting because it wasn't, I mean, by your own testimony, it's not like you had a deep revelation of God in that time, and it wasn't like you started living for God at that time, but you passed by there and God reminded you of that place, saying that this is where you first met me. So it seems like God had put you on a path toward him, even though you didn't know about it. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's so true. I had no idea where God had the plan he had for me. But I can remember my mom just saying, you need to go to church. You need to go to that church." And then she met some friends. We knew some people that had gotten saved at the door in Yuma at the time. And, they would go to my mom's house. I was already out of the house. And so I left home at 17. they would go to my mom's house. A couple of my brothers had gone to church, and they would go pick her up, pick my brothers up, and my mom would say, "Listen, you need to go to that church, the door. You need to go to the door." And I said, "Mom, that church can't help me. It's not, that church can't do anything for me. What do you mean I need to go to the door?" But the crazy thing, my mother never went to the door. But because she knew and heard some things, it's like, you need to go to the door.
She knew people were being changed
Yeah.
there, and she knew that you needed a change.
To a degree. But that's not what she said. She couldn't say, well, you need to go because you can be changed into a different person. And so, but yes, she was always, and the other crazy thing about it is I never heard my mother tell any of my other siblings, you need to go to the door. It was always me. You need to go to the door.
Was that because you were worse off than the rest?
I don't know. I'm assuming in her eye. But the way I viewed it, wait a minute, I haven't been to prison. I haven't gotten lost. These children they've been in and out of prison, in and out of jail. I ain't gone that far yet. And yet I'm not worse than they are.
Wow. So recovering from this shotgun blast injury, and you said you had a baby on the way. Your girlfriend at least did. So when did you end up getting married?
I got shot in July of '77. I've gone to Phoenix for some surgeries. Then the Phoenix hospital couldn't help me. Then they said, "Hey, you need to go to either San Francisco or to Memphis, Tennessee." There were two doctors, and one and two in the world on eye surgeries at the time. Just so it happened, the doctor that was in San Francisco was out doing some seminars in the other countries. So I ended up going to Memphis, Tennessee. And it was there, as I'm sitting there in Memphis, Tennessee, in it's called, I think it was Doctor's Hospital, uh, totally blind. I couldn't, I remember telling my girlfriend at the time, I said, "Hey, listen, when we get home, you can go wherever you want to go, do what you want to do. I'll never be the man that you expect me to be. So, you go in your own way." And her response was,
You were expecting her to leave you.
"Well, yeah, of course, because I was never going to be the man to go out and be able really to get a good job to support her, to support, our son at the time, And so I said, you can go your own way, do what you want to do." And again, orchestrated probably only by God. She said, "I'm not going nowhere. I'm not going to go end up having a child and be an unwed mother. That's not going to happen." So this was in August. I returned back from Memphis, Tennessee. I think I want to say August 22nd, 23rd, 24th. We ended up going to the Justice of the Peace, August 26th. So just a few days back, we ended up getting married.
Could you see her on your wedding day?
Yeah, it was all just the blur. It was just a blur. There was no big, because my vision, like I said, was still gone. I didn't have, it's just a blur. I remember we ended up going to the courthouse, got the marriage license, but we ended up getting married in my mother-in-law, in my mother's living room.
Wow. So I mean, I don't think a couple of 19-year-olds could really fathom what they're getting into. She's marrying you with this life-changing injury, so she's going to have to be your eyes, and you're going to have to lean on her quite a bit, aren't you?
Yeah, and that hasn't changed. I still lean on her quite a bit.
So that's a different dynamic than a lot of marriages. But maybe you can explain, what that means to you and how it has progressed through the years.
Like I said, we got married at 19. Obviously, from 19 to 25, because of me, my lifestyle, unwilling to change, unwilling to give up the drug scene, the party scene, the violence. My marriage suffered, but so we were heading for divorce court. There was no doubt, but I met some friends of mine that lived in the same neighborhood where we lived, and they were from Corpus Christi, Texas. He was stationed there in the military. So as our marriage was beginning to deteriorate very rapidly, very bad, within 6 years, there was no marriage. We would become roommates. And so I ended up going uh, to Corpus Christi to spend some time there to get away. But while I was there, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to be divorced. She's going to divorce me. There's no doubt in my mind. No doubt. I knew we were going to be divorced. Uh, in the process of that, we had known some friends that had gotten saved. So a lot of the
Well, I want to explore that just a little bit before we get to your salvation story. But, so the 6 years is kind of a long time to continually be stubborn and not want to change. Was there some, how do you explain that? What do you, looking back on it now, like what was going on in your mind that you were willing to let this person go who's willing to stay with you even through tragic circumstances?
Well, that's the thing. You have to first we got to understand it was all because of one's selfishness. And at 19, uh, even when she told me she was pregnant, I said, "And what does that have to do with me?" I wasn't in any mood to be a dad or even a husband at the time. I said, "What do you want me to do?" That's the way it was. And so that's where it ended, man. But in the process of time, they said we were able to somehow, and even before my salvation, there was an intervention of God in it.
Well, I'd love to hear about that. How did God intervene?
This is the thing. So here it is. I said I'm in Texas. Well, in the process of that, a coworker, one of our best friends in the world, brother ends up getting locked up for DWI. He gets saved in jail. Our best friend, she gets saved. And we knew some of her coworkers were already saved that I knew from the streets. And she went to a service. And sometime later, she calls me and says, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" She says, "I went to the door and I got saved." I said, "You did what?" And, and I came unglued. If I could have reached through the phone, I probably would have choked her to death. That's what
Explain that. Why did that enrage you so
I
bad?
had no, it's not like the church ever did anything to me. I didn't, I knew some people from the church. I had heard some stories but it's not like the church ever did anything for me. I guess because of me and who I was, it's just the violence, the anger that I had.
Yeah, that almost sounds demonic.
Yeah, probably pretty much. I would probably think so, to a degree. Yeah, but it was a rough deal. So
All right. So how did God soften that hard heart of yours?
it's not that I don't think that God softened. What happened was, so this would have been in March, the first time she went. She gave her life to Christ, I believe it was March 5th. April not
What was the year?
1983. March 5th, 1983. She gave her life to Christ. April 9th, 1983, well, actually April 8th, 1983, I returned from Texas to Phoenix. She picked me up in Phoenix. We drove to Yuma on the 9th, Saturday, and we're at home one evening. Well, on the 9th, we're at home, we're just talking. And at the time, my sister, you know, she's coming unglued at my wife because, well, how could you? You take this loser back, man. He's done nothing for you. He's no good, and on and on. And
She sounds sweet.
yeah, that's a whole other story in itself. But in time, so that night, it's starting to get dusk, man. And so we're there, just talking, and my wife said, "Hey, listen, let's go for a ride." I don't know what happened. I said, listen, I'm not going to that church. I'm telling you, I'm not going to that church. And I don't know what made me say that. I just did. And she said, no, we're just going to go for a ride. It's like, there's nothing new in Yuma I haven't seen. There's not a street that is different that I haven't been down probably 1,000 times in my life. So we did. And so, we wrote, and then she, and you have to understand the scene. I'm unable really to be clear of my surroundings. Everything is just shadow, an image that's not being very, very clear because of my vision. And so we pull into the church parking lot, and there it became World War III.
So you told her I'm not going to church, and then she drove you right there, thinking you wouldn't notice.
Thinking no notice. And so we got in a major fight in the parking lot. No fist fight. No, I never hit my wife, and back then I never did, even to this day. But we just got in an argument, man, and she says, "Okay, you think you're cool? You think you're slick? Okay." So what she did, she gets out and goes into the church and leaves me in the car. I can't go nowhere.
That's peer pressure.
I can't go nowhere. I can't see nothing. I can't see to walk home, even though I might have lived maybe a half a mile from the church, maybe a mile, but I couldn't see to go walk myself home. So I sat in the car, and then somebody came knocking on the door, on the window.
Okay.
And,
some friendly church person.
And, as he's talking to me, I knew who he was because he picked up. I met him a couple of times when he picked up my brothers at my mom's house when I was there visiting. And he said, "Why don't you come on in, man? There's nothing. Just check it out. It's just music." I'm like, "Nah, I'm okay." And it's amazing how we can, in all of our pride and our ego, our whole world's falling apart, and we can still say, "Nah, I'm okay. I'm all right. Yeah,
I'm good. I'm good. Yep.
And that was my mentality. So, but finally he convinced me. I'm sitting there. Back then we did the concert scenes. There's no chairs. It's just all carpet. You just laying, sitting, doing whatever you want to do. And I remember sitting there, and I'm just laid back, man. I'm just taking it all in, and I'm looking at everybody. I'm looking around. I can hear noise, chatter. I can hear, I can, the lights from the music and the guys that are playing. And this skinny white guy, man, stood up at the end, and he just started talking about some snake this, snake that, and I don't know. He could have been calling me a snake for all I know. And so all of a sudden, man, this a little bit more light came on, and next thing I knew, I'm surrounded by about 3, 4 guys. Now these aren't. I knew these guys from the streets before salvation. One of them was actually a very good friend of mine from the same neighborhood that he got saved. And they knew me. And one of them just made this statement, say, "Hey, Leonard, listen, man, you tried everything in the world. Once you give God a try." And it was like probably the best words he could ever say, because he said, if you don't like it, man, you can go back to the streets. I said, oh, that's a bargain I can take, man, because I wasn't. People say they're tired of their sin, they're tired of their life. I wasn't. And as I'm there, and we talk about the spiritual battle, and as I'm there listening, I hear a voice. This voice says, listen, you don't need that. This is for these people. These people are weak, man. You're fine. You don't need this God stuff. It's a crutch, man. You're better than that. And so then there's another voice that comes that I learned later on to be the voice of God. And it said, if you're going to survive life, this is what you better do. And I battled for a moment. Then clarity came, and I said, in my head, it said, if you're going to, well, I probably said, if I'm going to get back into my house with my wife, this is what I better do. Not willing to surrender still, only because I was looking for something rather than what saying a prayer was going to mean, and that was salvation.
Wow. So, man, that's a lot going on behind the scenes that nobody could see, but was a battle happening in your soul, huh?
And so, so I go down. They say, just say this prayer with me. We just repeat these words. I repeated those words. And there was no lightning. There was no voice from heaven. There was nothing, man. I wish it would have been, Apostle Paul's, conversion on the road to Damascus, man. That's all bright light, but nothing. So the next morning, Sunday morning, I step outside of my backyard, and for whatever reason, I looked up into heaven, and life became so clear. I could hear the birds chirping. I could, it's like if God removed the scales, man. Of like for one moment, God gave me clarity of vision, and it just seemed so bright. But everything, man, sound like I was hearing for the first time in life. My neighbor's outside. He said, hey, Leonard, you want to get loaded? I got some new stuff, man. Why don't you come on over? And I just looked over at him and I said, nah, I'm going to go to church. He said, well, after you come back from church, come on over. We'll get high. And, and so that was, like I said, that night, there was nothing. The next morning, man, light became clear.
Wow. So yeah, that's really compelling. I heard a very similar story from Pastor TJ Horta.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know him? Yeah. So when he gave his testimony on our podcast, he said something very similar. He said that when he got saved, like you said, like he didn't feel anything, no trumpet sounding from heaven, no rushing mighty wind or anything, but it was like when he stepped outside, like the sky was bluer and the trees were greener, and it sounds like you had kind of a similar situation, that God just gave you a sense of his presence in the normal mundane place of
Yeah,
life. Does that sound accurate?
exactly. And not only that, man, it's like almost like I have no desire to get, no desire to drink, to do anything. And I'm one of these guys. Before I went to sleep, I was getting. When I woke up, I was getting high. That was my start to my day and the end of my day. But that didn't even cross my mind when my neighbor invited me. I said, "No, I'm going to church," and that was it.
Well, I wonder if you would agree with this statement, like when God opened your eyes the way that you described, like he made life in salvation more interesting to you than the life of getting high in sin. And so it was like, compared to the experience you were having of the Holy Spirit opening your heart, like getting high seemed like not interesting compared to that.
Well, getting high at that moment didn't even cross my mind. There was no thought about getting high. Um, it was in that moment, and like I said, this is all after the fact, that I was completely delivered from drugs and alcohol and tobaccos, man, and a foul mouth, and I mean, just immediately, without even realizing that what took place.
That's a miracle. You love to hear it, man. So, and you said you were 26 when you prayed
25,
salvation and started going to church.
25.
25 in
Mhm.
1983. Man. So it is now 2023. It's been 40 years since that occurred. And we want to hear all about what happened after you got saved. I'm sure your life changed in 1,000 different ways. We want to hear about how you were called into the ministry. We want to hear about the ministry stations that you have served into, but we're going to save that for the second half of the conversation. And if you want to hear that, you got to be a premium subscriber. So if you are not already a premium subscriber, you can click one of those links down below and become one in a very short amount of time. But for now, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with part 2.